Creo. And I would say most of that is actually driven from the Creo side. So as you can see, right now, I don't even have Mathcad open. So this is Creo 2.0. I will admit, I don't think this is the latest release, latest maintenance release. I think there's been one out in the past month or so, and I don't have that installed yet. But that shouldn't really affect anything. So let's go ahead and get started. To really show you all the nitty-gritty details of the Creo Mathcad integration, I'm actually going to start from a blank part. So let's go ahead and create something from scratch. Let's go ahead and create this part called Mathcad cylinder, all right, CYL. So I'm just going to do something really basic. I'm going to make a cylinder within Creo, and I'm actually going to drive those dimensions from Mathcad. So let's go ahead and actually create a sketch. All right, so let's go ahead and pick this plane. Let's go ahead and make a sketch. Let's just draw a circle. All right, so I'm going to draw the circle here, and then hit OK. And then let's go ahead and extrude it. All right, so we get our cylinder. And let's make this 200 inches tall. All right, so there's a cylinder. Okay. Now, all of you already know that so these various features, right, actually have various dimensions associated with it. So this 200, for example, there's essentially a parameter that defines that 200, right? So if I wanted to know what that is, I can actually right-click. Well, let's take a look at the diameter first. Let's right-click on the sketch. Oops. Let me actually hit OK first on the extrusion. Let's go ahead and take a look at the sketch. And as you can see, give me a sec here. If I take a look at the info of this feature, and I can scroll all the way to the bottom, you notice that the dimension, the diameter for the dimension is actually D0, right? And if I were to do the same thing with the height of the cylinder on the extrusion, you'll see that it's pretty much the same thing. So it's going to be D1. And that's kind of important to keep in mind, because we're actually going to be using these in a little bit. All right, so D0 is the diameter and D1 is the height. So let's go ahead and actually do a couple different things. So the first thing I want to do before I actually start the integration is that the Mathcad Creo integration actually goes both ways, right? So you can actually pass the information from Mathcad to Creo, which is, I think, most of what you guys will be doing. But if you wanted to, you can actually go the other way as well. You can actually go from Creo to Mathcad. And to do so, I'm actually going to set up some parameters, right? So let me go ahead and create a new parameter. I'm going to call this scale, right? I'm going to give this a value of, let's say, 2. Okay? So as you can imagine, I'm going to use this to scale my model, up and down, right? And this is actually going to be a parameter that I'm going to pass from Creo into Mathcad. I'm going to hit OK. And let's go ahead with the integration. So the way the integration works is it's like any other analysis within Creo, right? I can actually specify either a Mathcad 15 analysis or a Mathcad Prime analysis. So I'm going to show you how it looks in Prime. Mathcad 15 actually, for the most part, behaves the same. There's a little bit, there's a slight difference. And if you're actually interested in knowing what that difference is, feel free to email us afterwards. We can actually send you a link that will, walk you through how to do this integration within Mathcad 15. But for today, let's go ahead and actually specify a Mathcad Prime analysis. And as I mentioned, let's really take this from the beginning, right? So it's going to take a little bit. My computer's a little bit slow today, and it seems to be loading right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new file, right? So a new Mathcad file. So here it is. Here's my new Mathcad worksheet. And let's go ahead and put in a couple different variables. So scale is equal to 1. Now keep in mind that when I specified scale in Creo just a moment ago, that was actually 2, right? So let's see how that looks when we actually integrate the two. Let's go ahead and specify a diameter, let's say, of 200 inches and a height of 100 inches. All right, and I'm going to actually display the results as well. So it's going to put a evaluation right next to it. And the reason why I'm doing this is because, well, I'll explain right now. So within Mathcad, when you want to actually establish an input and an output, it really depends on whether it's a definition or evaluation. So let me go ahead and show you. So right now, because this is a brand new worksheet, right, there are no inputs and there are no outputs. Okay? So let's go ahead and say that I want to specify this as an input, right? Notice how I can only specify this as an input, right? The output is actually grayed out. So what this means is if I want to actually bring something in from Creo, right, I need to actually tie that down to a definition of a variable. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because if I'm bringing in a variable from Creo, I can't actually override an evaluation, right? Because an evaluation is based on some calculations, right? And I can't just say, well, A plus B is equal to some value and override that value in Mathcad. So it makes sense that the only things you can bring into Mathcad is the definition, right? Likewise, you can actually do the same thing for the evaluation. So these, as you can see, is going to be outputs, right? So if I click on output right now, this shows up. Let me give it an alias of D, and then click on H, and I'm actually going to specify an alias of H, right? So now I have one input and two outputs, right? And let me go ahead and save this. And let me go ahead and save this to my desktop. I'll call it cylinder. Okay. It already exists, fine. I'll just replace it. And so now, if I were to come back into to Creo now, notice how cylinder actually shows up, right? I've created this worksheet and I've attached it to this analysis. So now this Mathcad worksheet is going to be used inside this analysis feature. So let's go ahead and actually do an automap. Okay, I guess that doesn't really work. That's fine. I just specified one by one. I'm actually going to select a Creo parameter. So let's go ahead and see. As you already know, as we saw from before, that parameter was called scale. I'm going to hit OK, and for some reason it's still not giving me an automap result. So let's go ahead and specify the input. Right, there's only one input, so I don't need to worry about that. I'd say OK. And so far, so good. Let's do the same thing from going to prime into Creo, right? So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to right-click here. I'm going to select a prime output. And there are two values here, right? So I'm going to select them both. Now, notice how even though I specify the dimensions with inches, right? They're coming up as meters, and these are actually meters that are equivalent to the values that are defined. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And as you can see, Mathcad's now going to map those two variables within Mathcad to these parameters within Creo. They're going to be called MCP_D and MCP_H. Now I'm going to hit compute, and when I hit compute for the first time, notice how this feature now, this add feature button now gets enabled. I'm going to go ahead and add this. So I'm going to call this Mathcad CYL. So for cylinder, I'm going to go ahead and just specify it, and let's go ahead and close. So again, it's a little bit slow on my machine today. Normally shouldn't take that long, but as you can see now, this Mathcad CYL is now a feature within this particular part. Now you might think, oh, well that's odd. My dimensions didn't actually change yet, right? So we got to back up for a second here. So what I've done right now is I've taken those variables from Mathcad into Creo, but I actually haven't tied those variables down to anything yet. So to do so, we actually need to go ahead and specify some relations, right? So I'm going to go over to Tools. I'm going to set up a relation, and I first need to look for my particular parameters, and I need to look for it inside my feature. My feature is my Mathcad analysis. I'm going to hit OK. Oops, sorry. Let me do it again. So look in feature, into the Mathcad feature, and then my local parameters, as you can see, is my MCP_D and H. So I'm going to right-click and just say Insert Relations, right? Now remember, my D0, right, was my diameter. So I'm going to say D0 is equal to MCP_D, and I'm going to do the same thing for the H, for the height. I'm going to say Insert Relations, and this is going to be D1, right? So I need to specify which dimensions I want to be tied down to which Mathcad variables. So now that I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything, all right, so these have been verified, good. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just going to go ahead and regenerate this. All right, so again, this will take a little bit of time. Now, you have to keep in mind that even though this is a very simple part, the regeneration actually takes a little bit longer, and mainly it's because we're essentially opening up Mathcad. As you can sort of see, Mathcad sort of blinks, right, when this process is going on. And so now, let's go ahead and actually take a look. So this actually should have all the newest dimensions. So if I were to go ahead and take a look here, I can right-click on here and say Edit Definition. Notice how this is the 100 that we specified, right? And if we were to take a look at the sketch and Edit Definition, there's the 200 that we specified. Okay? So far so good. So, all right. So it seems to me that everything's working, but how about the parameter that we're going to pass from Creo into Mathcad? So let's go ahead and actually go back into this definition again. I'm going to right-click and say Edit Definition, and I'm going to hit Next. Okay. And let's go ahead. Let's give it a second here. And so again, it takes a little bit of time because Mathcad actually has to open up, right? And especially when we're editing the definition of this analysis. So here's Mathcad, and you notice something really peculiar here, right? So I define a scale of 1, but it's evaluating to 2, right? So you can sort of say that this might be a little bit of a bug. I would say, I mean, you can think of it that way, but it's really just telling you, hey, listen, even though you specified a scale of 1, that value was actually overwritten by something. We don't know what, if I were to open up this worksheet for the first time, it just tells you that the value is overwritten by some sort of other application, and it's not equal to 2. And if I were to go ahead and actually scale it, right, so scale, I'm going to multiply this, both D and H by the scale factor. And as you can see, they're both going to increment by a factor of 2, right? So the integration is working, right? So we already saw these values being passed into Creo, and now as you can see, this value is being passed, the D and H are passed to Creo, and the scale is being passed from Creo. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to go back into this analysis window. I'm going to go ahead and hit Compute, and notice how these two values update, right? Because I just changed the definition of those. So let's go ahead and close, and I will go ahead and set these values. And for the most part, you probably won't see much of a difference here because I believe Creo actually does do some rescaling for you, so you can't always tell the difference, right? But we will take a quick look at the dimensions just to make sure that they are what we specify them to be. So again, give it a sec while it's regenerating. Okay, and hopefully it should be done soon, and hopefully the values that we saw previously are going to be multiplied by a factor of 2. So let's go ahead and actually just take a look at that. Let's go ahead and actually, I think it did actually expand for us. So if we were to go ahead and right now and say Edit Definition, right? So notice how it is now 200 as opposed to 100 from before, right? Let me actually exit from here, and now if I want to be really sneaky about this, I can go ahead and let's go ahead. So we just saw that it was 200, right? So let's go ahead and just take a quick look. So let's measure this. So this is a, all right. So this is a, what is it? It's area. So let's take a look at these values, right? It's about 125,000 inches square for the area. So actually, this might not be the best way to do so. Let me go ahead and so if I took a look at the height, we already saw that was 200, and we take a look at the sketch, we'll see that it's equal to 400, right? So let's go ahead and now go back into the parameters, right? So go back to Tools, Parameters, and now if I specify this to 1, right? So I don't want any scaling, okay? Now I do the same thing. I can just do a regenerate, and then Creo will automatically pass this parameter over into Mathcad. Mathcad's going to take it, multiply by 1 for both the D and the H, and then we should see both of those values go back to what they were originally, right? So just give me a sec while this runs through again, and we should go back and see the new updated values. Okay, so as I'm showing you here, I can have a parameter drive being driven from Creo. That's going to drive the Mathcad worksheet, and then that's going to come back into my Creo part, right? Now, as you can see, again, this doesn't actually look any different. And I believe it's because it's being scaled automatically by the viewer. So if I were to right-click right now and say Edit Definition, notice how it's now down to the 200, right? This is the 200 that's specified in Mathcad. And if I were to go ahead and do the same thing right now to the extrusion, now it's back down to 100. Okay? So hopefully you saw how the integration works. That should seem pretty straightforward to you. So I mean, this is pretty straightforward because it's mostly just one dimension being tied down to one variable being tied down to one dimension. Let's do something a little bit more complex. All right, I'm actually going to create a new part. I'm going to call this Mathcad Cam, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And so this is a new part, and what I want to do now is actually have a profile of points that I want to bring in from Mathcad. Okay, so the same thing as before. I'm going to go ahead into my analysis. And I'm going to create a Mathcad prime analysis. this time, as opposed to creating a new file, I already have a file that this is for me. So when this is done loading, I'm actually going to click on the load file button instead, and then we'll see how that looks. All right, so let's go ahead and load a new file, and let's go to my desktop, and the Mathcad worksheet is called CAM. And go ahead and open that up. And so, as you will see, I mean, you've already seen this before with the previous example. Mathcad is actually going to open up. Creo is actually going to open up Mathcad. So this is actually a Mathcad worksheet that I've already previously created. And as you can see here, I specify, some different angles for the rise and the for the rise angle and also the dwell angle of the CAM part. I can actually pick the equation that I want to use for both the rise and the fall, right? As you can see here, this is being enabled. The other two are actually grayed out. So you can pick different ones depending on what you want to use as a profile, and you can take a look at how you can take a look at the velocity versus what is this, the angular acceleration, right? So, just the acceleration of this particular profile. And what's mostly important to this particular demo is finally the profile, right? So this is the profile of this CAM that we've essentially designed within Mathcad. Right, and what I mean by design is we pick the profile equation, we pick the angles and so forth. Depending on what those angles are, it will give me this profile. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to take those points, right? And right now this is inside a variable called curve, and as you can already see, I've stored this to an output called I forget what it's called. I think it might be called profile. So let's go ahead and show this as a list. And as you can see, yeah, sure, there's a bunch of inputs, right? And then the output is called profile. Okay, so let's go back into Creo, and I'll do the same thing as before. So I'm going to add an output from prime to Creo. Let's go ahead and select it, and there should only be one because there's only one output, as we just saw, and it's called profile. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to compute just like before, and give it a sec. And notice how it's going to come back with a bunch of dashes, right? So it's no longer giving me a specific value because there is no one value. It's now actually an array of values. In this case, it's X, Y, Z values, right? So that matrix that we just saw previously had 3 columns, right? So X, Y, and Z, right? And so in this particular case, one of the columns that's picked to be my X column is always going to be 0 because really what I have is just a 2D drawing. But when it goes into Creo, it has to know all 3 dimensions, right? So now that this is all over here inside Creo, again, just like before, I add a new feature. I can call it Mathcad profile, and let's go ahead and accept this. Okay, and as you can see, it actually shows you those points, right? And these are being plotted right now within Creo. Now the thing is, right now I can't actually do anything with this yet. Right, and the reason for this is, I mean, as you all know, that you create a sketch, right, and then that sketch is then extruded, and you do whatever you want with that sketch. So what we need to do is actually somehow make this into some sort of a curve, right? So there's a couple of different ways we can do this, but the easiest, in my opinion, is just to change the definition. I'm going to change the definition so that, as you can see here now, this is coming back as points. So I'm going to say no to points. I'm going to say yes to curve. All right, I'm going to accept. And now as opposed to points, I'm actually going to get essentially a curve going through those points. And again, let's give it a second while it's essentially opening up Mathcad again, running through the calculations, getting those points, and then essentially recreating that curve with those points. So wait, and okay, and there it is. So here's my curve that's coming directly from my Mathcad analysis. And now, before I can actually extrude this, there's actually one more thing I need to do first. So I need to go back into, let's go ahead and pick a sketch, the plane that that part is on, and I need to actually create an offset. So the offset is actually just going to be an offset of this curve right here. Yeah, for some reason, when it comes directly in to Creo, you can't actually extrude out that part. You have to create an offset first. So let's go ahead and close this, right? And now that I have this, I can go ahead and extrude it. So let's go ahead and extrude, and yeah, let's leave it at 0.02. Right, so there's my cam with that profile. And just like before, if I wanted to actually modify this, again, I just right-click. Let's go ahead and set this first. I always forget that last step. I can just right-click, edit the definition, and if I were to change, let's say, the angle or the equation that I'm using, I'll be generating new points within Mathcad, and I'll be getting new points back into Creo, and you would actually see an updated curve for this particular camp plot. Okay. So I know we have about 5 minutes left, so let's go and show one last thing. I know we've crammed a lot of content here, but as you can see here, what I have is I have an I-beam part, right? And I already have a particular Mathcad worksheet that's doing all the calculations for me. So what I can now do is same thing as before. I can edit the definition. I'm going to hit next, right? And the way I'm actually doing this particular integration is that I'm actually choosing from a catalog of different part numbers, and depending on the part number, I can actually pick the values for these particular, for the radii, the height, and so forth, right? So let's, again, give it a moment while this is opening up. And so these are all my different points here. And what I should have done was I should have actually set it to a really drastic number first. So just to actually go backwards, let me actually, this is usually my dummy variable. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 ones. Actually, shoot. I think I might have changed that. So let's just pick the first one. So 4193888, right? So that actually immediately goes and grabs all the different variables from this particular table, and then it populates them into into all these variables down here. So now if I were to go back, let's go ahead and save this, right? Now I can go back into Creo, and so I want you to pay attention to these points right here, right? So when I go ahead and hit compute, it's actually going to grab all those different values from that new line that is selected, and I can go ahead and hit close. And I apologize for this because you won't be able to see much of a difference here, mainly because all these parts actually are very similar. Even though we saw the numbers change, as it looks actually in the 3D model, it's pretty much the same thing. But the whole point here is that now we can actually have one Mathcad worksheet. We can change one value. It's going to pull all the different dimensions that pertains to that particular part number. I don't need to actually do this one by one within Creo anymore, right? I can just go ahead and basically just do it within Mathcad, and then all those values will be ported over into Creo. So yes, the setup portion is going to take a little bit more time than usual because you got to go in, you got to define all those relationships, right, that I showed you earlier on. But once you make that initial investment, I think moving down the road, whenever you have any new changes, it's going to be that much faster, right? It also saves you the problem of actually making a typo, right? If I'm typing in this 21.4, 36.6, 420.5, I mean, it's likely that I actually might make a transcription error, right? Well, if the integration is actually already set up, then you don't need to worry about that. You just got to make sure that you select the right part number, and then you get to go. Okay? So again, I know we covered a lot of content, so I'm going to leave the last remaining minutes for any questions that you guys have, and also Jessica also has an exit poll that she wants to conduct. So if you have any questions, just type it into the chat, and we'll try to address them, given the time that we have. And thanks for attending.
Yep, and ladies and gentlemen, we do have a few final polling questions, as Roger said, for you to answer. We thank you for your time for taking these. The first polling question is, this webcast met my expectations. Please select one. This webcast was easy to understand.